Hello everyone, this is Ben. Thank you for joining me on yet another video on my channel. It's 10:30 on a Monday night. I came back from a weekend full of class yesterday, and I'm now entering a period where I can actually sit back and breathe again and think about what's been happening for me the past since September 1st. It's almost November, so it's been a packed 2 months of just busyness, and people I keep seeing are always saying to me, "You look so different," and I say, "In what way?" And they say, "Well, you look a little tired," but they don't mean that I'm going to be thrown out of Parliament or anything like that, right? I am tired. I am exhausted. I don't feel bad though. It's one of those exhaustions where I've just been constantly on the go, 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 go. But I can't fault what I've been doing. So, as I said in the past two videos, I had a lot of stuff going on with Tribal Hearth starting in August. I had a Culticon. I met John, who is my current partner right now. And that was a big thing during September and October. And then I also started school. So I started school at the Transformational Arts College down in Toronto. And now that I actually know how to get there without getting lost, and I actually know how to get there in the morning without it taking like 5 hours, it is a smooth process. It is very exhausting though. And I've only been to 3 courses so far, and I already feel like I've changed in that time. So what I'd like to talk about today, or at least in this video, is I'd like to speak about anger. And I'd like to speak about some of my experiences this past weekend. So it was with an instructor that we had previously in September, and a fabulous instructor. And we were talking about anger and emotional healing on the weekend. So I go down on Saturday morning, and Saturday was a lot of theory, and I feel really unresponsible, or irresponsible I should say, because throughout the day my energy level was quite low, not only because I was taking a lot of dense information in, and the information that we're covering is not new to me, but it's new in that it's through a different lens, and so it might as well be new to me. But it's a lot of dense information to get through, and I felt throughout the day like I was falling asleep, and I really hoped that it wasn't noticeable to anybody in the class, and I hope it wasn't noticeable to the instructor. And I could hear perfectly. It was just that the exhaustion kept creeping up on me. And that was mainly my issue. That's something that I need to be better at, is fueling myself in the morning and not just going on an empty stomach, but also taking time to actually eat proper food at lunch, something that's going to revitalize, something that will get me through the afternoon, because so far it's been a lot of heavy emotional work. So Saturday I came back. Saturday evening I went and stayed at my godfather's house, and hung out with him and his partner. And then Sunday morning I drove back to Toronto, and it was a very different day. I left a little bit late from Hamilton, so I ended up getting there just at 10 o'clock to where the school was. And then I had to walk to school, which took a few minutes, and then when I got upstairs to where the class was, the door was closed, and the morning mantra was being played. So this instructor likes to set the scene and set the space with a morning mantra. And so we'd spoken about it the previous day, of what would happen, what she would appreciate if and when the morning mantra is playing, is that if anybody comes late, don't enter and disrupt that process. To be respectful and stand outside. And I was already feeling a little bit frustrated with myself, because I was late, and that's not my godfather's fault. It's entirely it's just something that happens, right? So I stood in the hallway, and I was feeling flustered. I was feeling like I was very late. I really wasn't that late, but I felt it, and so I decided in that moment I can continue to feel flustered, or and carry that throughout my day, or I can center, ground, and bracket, something that we've been really developing in that classroom that's really stressed throughout the program. That idea of no matter what situation you find yourself in, honor whatever you're feeling, but in that moment, center, ground yourself, and then bracket that feeling and move it to the side to come back to at a more appropriate time. So I center, grounded, bracketed, let the song flood over me. It was a beautiful mantra, and so after that I went in and I sat down, and the instructor looks at me, and she gives me a great big smile, and she says, "Good morning, Ben." I say, "Good morning." And I'd been listening to what one of my classmates was saying while I was still outside. So after the mantra, Sue invites one of the members of the class to give a message of center, grounding, and bracketing. And I can't remember the words that Fran was saying, but the message to me was very much that: slow down, take a deep breath, everything will be okay in that moment anyways. Just be present and allow yourself to push aside all those voices that would cause you to feel negatively. So center, grounding, and bracketing. So I went in, I sat down, and the instructor looks at me, and she thought that I was going to say something, so she said, "Good morning, Ben. What did you want to share something?" And I said, so I shared with my experience standing in the hallway of feeling flustered, being late, and coming to class and not wanting to bring that in. So instead, deciding to stand in the middle of the hallway outside and listening to that music and center, grounding, bracketing, listening to what my classmate had to say. And then when I felt it was appropriate, which wouldn't disrupt the class, to then enter and take my seat. And the instructor looked at me and she smiled and she said, "Now that is a very good example of what we're trying to speak about in this course. That intention of setting a space, of center, grounding, and bracketing, and truthful words can pass right through a doorway and even out into a corridor and affect somebody who, might have felt very frustrated or flustered or in a panic mode or whatever. And that really is the power that we want to bring into our practices of creating that safe space, that grounding space for clients to come to. So that really set the tone of the day for me, and the whole weekend was amazing because I got to spend time with my godfather, and I got to spend time with his partner, and I learned a lot through that process because I hadn't really spent a lot of time with them one-on-one, and so being able to go over, and they hosted me, which was very nice, and then to go into that day yesterday where it was a lot of emotional work. And so, I'll share this with you because this is interesting. So part of the class was therapy and how emotion comes out, and I will get to what I intend to talk about, which is anger, in a moment. So one of the pieces of music that we played, and I've been trying to find it. I'm sure I can find it online somewhere, but it was very beautiful. It was very sing-songy sort of. It was very flowing music. It was very upbeat music at times. But the main lyrics was, "How dare someone make you feel, or how dare they say you're not beautiful? How dare they say that you're not deserving?" Along that vein. And so the instructor asked us to basically whatever we were feeling at that moment, take some pens and the pieces of paper in front of us and kind of draw what we were feeling. And so this is what I drew. at least in the first one. See if I can see that there. There we go. So we've got like this idea of flowing just at the top here. We've got this beautiful flowing. You can't really see it here. Let's see if you can see that. So musical notes flowing around. We've got an Om symbol here, and for some reason, right here, for some reason I kept seeing 7. 7 was very important, or at least part of that process for me. Then we have the meditation eyes down here, and the searing bindi, which represents the third eye, and then smoke. I just can't have this sense of smoke rising from that bindi, like the heat of the third eye. And then down here we have a moon, a crescent moon. I'm still trying to figure what that is. I don't think it's a bomb. I'm pretty sure that's not a bomb, but it's it was interesting because when I was going through it, and this is so typically me, like it's so typically what I do, I'll externalize, and I'm really getting good at not doing that now and owning it. So when I was listening to the song, because of course I've done so much inner work over the past few years, of course, I started to think about my boyfriend. And I mean, it's a private thing. I'm not going to talk too much about his experience, but he had aspects of his life where people told him that he wasn't beautiful, and I'm going to ask him before. I did ask him if I could post this and talk about this, just as an example. So, just like myself, and I think a lot of people have this as well. But at least my experience too has been there's been times where people have told me blatantly, very blatantly, that I'm not beautiful, that I'm disgusting, that I'm all of these things, right? And so I started to think about John, and I started to become very protective and I started to become very annoyed and very irritated for him. And then I realized that, okay, part of me was feeling that for John. But then I realized, well, this is my process. So in this situation, what does John represent? And I then realized that really what John, and I love John, don't get me wrong, I love John, but in this case it wasn't actually John who I was thinking about, it was actually myself. So he was standing in for an aspect of myself. And so I shared that with the instructor. And I found it to be a very interesting moment for me. So that was one of the insights I took out. So I feel like I need to really develop more of an understanding of what that meaning was. So we had another situation. So the instructor opened it up for other comments, and somebody else in the class became very emotional because of what was being brought up for her. The lines, "How dare you," or "How dare they not say you're beautiful," really, it touched a strong part of her experience, and so she became very emotional, and that came through as crying. And for me, I completely understood what she was saying, because what she was saying was my experience as well, and I held space for her. There was also a point about the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is completely holding space for somebody else, but it not affecting you, or at least it not bringing up things for you. Sympathy was where you suddenly, it's all about you. So I did become sympathetic in that moment, and I felt like she was crying for me. And I raised my hand and I said, you know, in that moment, it was powerful for me to watch you you cry. And I should explain what brought us to this. So in the moment, the instructor asked if she trusted it and if it would be okay if the instructor would act as that person's inner voice. And so she opened it up to everybody in the class of how did you respond, how did you feel when you saw this other classmate begin to cry because a classmate had said that she felt like she couldn't cry because she felt like she would be judged, and so stepping into that moment was a place of vulnerability. And so other people, and many other people in the class, said how they responded to it and how it touched them and what their experience was listening to her. And for me, it was very much of, I felt like she was crying for me because as she was saying and explaining her experience, I could understand too. So that was a very interesting moment. And I when she was crying, it made me understand that yes, I can understand somebody else's experience on a very personal level without it becoming necessarily it all about me, because it wasn't all about me. That was her experience. It just so happened to resonate with me at that moment. So then after that, and several other people in the class went and spoke about their experience and what came up for them. We then moved and shifted into going through listening to the music again. No, that didn't happen. No. Okay, so what my classmate had said and the emotional aspect came after. So what we had done after we had shared what this was and what had come up for us, we then did it again, and we were asked. It was a very long day. I'm like trying to piece it all together here. We were asked to really think about the lyrics and to think about the music again. So we listened to the music again, and to paint what comes to us again, and to notice the difference. And so we did it again, and this was my drawing. What I felt afterwards was, or what I felt in the second time, was a lot of bitterness, a lot of resentment, because throughout my life, I've had to work very hard at learning to love myself. I've had to work very hard at gaining a sense of equilibrium again. I've had to work very hard at building to that sense of positive self-identity. I've had to work towards being able to look at myself and say that I'm beautiful. And I'm still working through that process now. I can look in the mirror and look at myself and say, you're beautiful, and believe it. But the resentment is how much work I've had to put into that, and I think that's this really builds into what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So the picture here represents a staircase leading up to a shining, beautiful door. And it's funny because when I was listening to the music and and the image of the door started coming in, I was reminded of Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. So Daenerys Targaryen is a princess who was exiled from her kingdom, for those of you who don't know Game of Thrones, and when she was a child, and her older brother Viserys always held her in contempt because her mother, or their mother, died in childbirth with Daenerys, and so Viserys raised Daenerys, and they were moving from city to city to city on the other continent, far away from their family's throne. And Daenerys had this image in her mind always of a sense of home being a blue door. And whenever I think of that blue door, it's like, yeah, that sense of home, but it's always at the top of the staircase and always closed. So the sense of the blue door. And so that image became quite powerful for me. And also the bitterness of having to, at least in that moment, that bitterness of having to even work towards knowing that I'm a beautiful person. That I you know what I mean? And it was a very physical, guttural, like, feeling of, oh, why did I have to work that hard, right? But then the flip side of that, and something I came to realize when I was driving home, was the flip side, the positive aspect of that is that ownership of, yeah, I had to work hard, but I own that now, you know? Nobody can tell me that I'm not beautiful if I believe it and I've worked and I own that, right? And that's powerful. That was like, like Oprah's aha moments, you know? So the other image here is this image, and I got this image of the moon, or like an asteroid, just like hurtling down from space and just impaling a heart. And so I find that very interesting, that idea that, you know, cataclysm can happen and just destroy your heart, but at the same time there's hope, because you can always get back up and rebuild yourself. There's always that blue door waiting for you at the top. So that was interesting. So that was only in the first 20 minutes of the class. Like, I can't even explain what an incredible day it was. It was it was a day of sharing. It was a day of feeling deeply. It was a day of vulnerability for, I think, the majority of the class. Later on in the day, and I'm very glad that I actually did this. Later on in the day, we were invited to sit in our anger. We were talking about various different emotions, and the whole point of this, in this course, the whole point of getting connected with our anger and understanding it of the depth of our own frustration and anger and other emotions, is that anger usually is the gateway, and sitting behind the gateway are the core issues, the core emotions. So anger presents itself as a defense mechanism, but it's rarely it's rarely entirely by itself. It will always have something behind it. So the exercise was for to basically showcase various different forms of anger and how anger can manifest. And what the instructor did was, she asked if there were any volunteers who would come up and step into their anger, or step into the emotion that they had listed. So the exercise the day before was to list down all of the emotions we show very easily and very well, to show emotions that intimidate us, you know, emotions that we might be fearful of for whatever reason, and then emotions that we don't express easily, or we don't express at all. And so it did take a little bit of self-awareness to do this. My list of emotions that I express very well was very much contextual to who I'm surrounded by, and I find that with my life in general. Those of you who know me very well will know this. My family, Liam and my mum and dad and my sister, will know this, that when I'm around them, I can become a very bitter, angry child, right? And I can stamp my feet, and I can just be irrational, and I get very condescending, and all of these things. When I'm around people that aren't my family, I'm a lot more guarded with my emotions. And I think I don't want to say I think to some degree most people are, because that in itself is taking it outside of myself. For me, I generally try to be consistent throughout all of the groups and around people in general. My boyfriend noted that too, that I generally am very consistent throughout various different spheres and with different peoples. That is true to some extent. But one thing I don't show very well is anger, because I'm afraid that I'm afraid that if I show and express anger, that I will, first of all, I'll look like a fool if I'm not justified in that anger. That I won't be able to control it. And I think ultimately what it comes down to for me is, if I show my anger, it won't be rational, it won't be justified, I won't be able to, like, there won't be any reason for it, and that ultimately it'll make people abandon me. So really it comes down to abandonment issues. And I've had a lot of experience in my life where a lot of people in my life did abandon me. Well, one experience in my life where a lot of people abandoned me. And that's not something that you can easily get away from without scar tissue forming, or like a lot of defenses around that forming. And one of those is anger. I feel like if I express anger, then people won't like me. And that seems to be a default concern for me throughout my life, is that, you know, if people don't like me, then they'll abandon me and I'll be all alone. And so when we did that part of the assignment, writing down those lists of things, and I was very truthful with that list of what I express easily. When I'm surrounded by my family, I can become jealous. When I'm surrounded by other people, I will feel jealousy. I won't necessarily, like, I'll be very guarded so that it doesn't come across. But there was a mixture of positive and negative. But anger specifically, it was an interesting one, because I don't raise my voice when I'm surrounded by other people. There's been times where I've been very irritated and I've almost snapped at somebody, and then immediately regretted it afterwards. And my poor family, my dad and my mum, I'm constantly snapping at, and it's stuff that I know, like, I don't like about myself, and I'm working. I think over the next few years I'll be able to really work on those, at least I hope. So the experience of stepping into anger came to a head when the instructor asked for volunteers to come up and do a role play, where she would be the therapist and we would be the client. And so there were two other people in front of me, and they expressed two different emotions. One was anger, and the other one was, I think it was abandonment. I can't think what it is now. The whole day, I mean, it's all in there. I just really need time to just, you know, to deconstruct the weekend. So then I almost didn't go up, because I felt like I deluded myself into thinking that the first two had already expressed what I was going to express, so, you know, why should I go up? And then the instructor looks at me and she turns to me and she says, "Now, Ben, I think you volunteered before to come up. Are you still interested in coming up? Would you still like to go through that process?" And it was a weird moment, because inside I was like, oh, do I really want to do this? And then the whole class started to cheer. "Yeah, Ben, you should go up. Oh, Ben, you should go up." And it was just like, it felt like yeah, I'll do this, okay. So I went up, and the instructor pulled me aside. She said, "You know, how deeply do you want to go with this?" I said, "I'll go deep." And she said, "Do you want to raise your voice?" And I said, "Yeah, I feel comfortable raising my voice." She said, "Okay, okay, we'll do this." So she was very like, and she said, "You know, I'm here if you need me. You know, if you want to stop at any time, just say stop, and I'll do that." And so I asked her, "Is it okay if I close my eyes while doing this?" Because I knew that I was going to step into anger. And she said, "You do whatever you feel you need to do to feel safe. But if you feel safe enough, I'd encourage you to open your eyes and to look at your classmates while in that moment. But only if you feel safe to do." Okay, absolutely. So I started thinking about a situation that I've been dealing with over the past couple of months, where I came to understand and realize that I had been used by somebody. And this is somebody who, and I'm not going to tell you what the situation is, because it's irrelevant. It really doesn't. the situation is just an example. But I felt like I was being used, and I just let it go completely. I've never released outside of my family. I've never raised my voice in such a way before. No, I can't say that I have. But not in recent years. In recent years I have been very subdued and I've kept it inside. I raised my voice and I called him a fucking douchebag, and I shouted at him and I told him or her what I was feeling inside, that I had felt used, that I felt betrayed, that I felt like they had taken me for granted. I felt like I was naive. I felt like I was it reinforced the idea that I was nothing but a child. And I began to cry, and I began to shout, and I took hold of my sides, and I was just holding myself like this because I was so frustrated, and I really stepped into that emotion. And I opened my eyes and I was like, but I couldn't look at any of them. I could not look any of them in the eye. I checked a couple of them and they were stunned because I was just going at it. I was just letting it all out, and I could feel the tightness down here, and I could feel the frustration and the embarrassment and the vulnerability. And I took a deep breath after I felt like most of it had come out. And I was shaking, and I felt clammy, and I felt release. And I also felt a huge amount of exhaustion because the weight of the past 7 weeks just completely climbed onto me. And I centered, grounded, and bracketed. And the professor was there, the instructor was there, and she came and she looked me right in the eye, and we connected. And I can't even remember what she said now. Basically, the gist of it was, you went to a really deep place, and I'd like to ask, the class how that affected them, because nearing the end of it, I became acutely aware that, or at least a voice inside of me said and whispered, don't play act. Don't act. We're going to look at you and think you're just being melodramatic. And you are being just melodramatic, right? And so I verbalized that, and I said that I told the class that was how I was feeling closer to the end of it. And I was still tears streaming down my face. And during it, I completely forgotten about this just now. No, during it, the instructor had said, somehow she'd gotten to, I want you to let it out. Or she didn't say exactly like that, but if what you're feeling was a sound, what would it sound like? And I just roared. I just, like, the frustration with it, the raw emotion of it. It just came out, and I just opened my mouth and I just roared like, well, I can't do it now because I'm not in the moment, but it was just such a, and it was so strong, but it was so painful, and it was just so angry, and like it hurt my throat how loud it was. And that I realized was, well, at least that's when I started to realize that my go-to when it comes to anger with people is to either be constructive or to just sit there and take it and agree. And in this situation, at least, I sat there and I took it and I agreed and I smiled and I said how wonderful they were, and when what I really should have been saying was how I felt like I had been used by them, how I felt like they took advantage of me, used me, didn't give me any of the proper credit, and and how that was bringing up all of these things in my life about how I work so hard sometimes for groups, and it's because I want them to like me. I want to be accepted by people, I want to be loved by people, and I want to be accepted by them, right? And when someone takes advantage of that just makes me feel like it makes me feel like I'm betrayed, because they're using one of my most best qualities to use me. And it's such a violent thing, because all they're doing is taking from me. And that deeply, deeply angers me, because it's a shameful... I feel shame. I feel ashamed when I allow people to do that. And I should say, it doesn't happen to me very often. But over the past few years, it has happened to me a couple of times, and each time I just dismiss it, but I just bury the feelings, when really I should do what I normally do when it comes to minor frustrations, and that is to talk them out, to bring them up, and to come to a resolution with them. There was another thing, I'm trying to think what it was. There was another thing about generosity, because I came to realize, so my dad, and I mean, he's not gonna watch this YouTube video. My brother might, my sister might, but he's not going to. But my dad is one of those. He's one of those people where he has wanted love and acceptance from people his entire life. When he was younger, he didn't get that from his father. At least as far as I know, he didn't get the acknowledgement from his father. Mainly because my grandfather was a self-made man from Manchester, which is a very industrial city. He was a child of the Victorian era, basically. He was born in the 1920s, I believe, at some point. So, or maybe earlier than that. But he was brought up in that whole Victorian mentality, where affection isn't shown, and my dad has always been a very generous person, but he does it with that sense of wanting to be accepted by people. And I noticed this a few years ago. What I'm starting to notice is that I'm doing that as well, or at least I've done it myself in my life. So I've become very I'll give things to people, and I've begun to realize that with a good many of those people, it was because I wanted them to like me. And it always comes back to that default position of abandonment issues, right? And I find it interesting that I share that with my father now, because before, that would always really frustrate me about him, because I didn't want people to take advantage of that generosity in him, because it's such a beautiful thing. How that actually came out was I got frustrated with my father. Why are you doing that? Don't put yourself in that position. And I think what it really comes down to is I didn't want people to take advantage of him, because I myself was being taken advantage of in that way. It wasn't satisfying, you know. So when I stepped into that position of anger, in that specific situation of anger, that's why it was such a deep feeling and such a powerful experience for me. And you have to understand also, in that class, we've only met 3 weekends. We've only spent a week with each other, 6 days with each other. and yet I felt safe enough to do that in that course. So it was very insightful for me, and there was a lot of things I need to unpack from it, and that's what I'm looking forward to in the next couple of weeks. So my partner John is currently away from Ontario. He's not coming back for another 3 weeks or so, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him. And John, you're probably going to be listening at this point at some point, so just know that I absolutely adore you and love you so much. But it's good because for the next 2-3 weeks at least, I have nothing. There's no class. Class is going to be at the end of November again, and so I'm going to have a lot of chance to really deconstruct over the past couple of weeks. The assignment that came out of that course was interesting because it's a very good tool. Actually, I know about it from before, but it's basically it's a role-playing exercise where you write a letter to somebody who has done you wrong, who has made you feel a certain way, but you don't send it to them. But you write it as if you're going to send it to them, and then wait a week and write a reply. Reread the letter and write a reply. But write a reply the way you would want a reply to be written, and then wait a week, and then reread the letter. So it's a very powerful therapeutic tool for those people who don't have closure, or who can't get closure, or just need to have some things settled inside. Right? So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a very powerful experience to go through. School is incredible. School is everything and so much more than I thought that it would be. But now, after only 3 weeks, I understand how exhausting it's going to be, and how I'm going to need a lot of self-care. It's interesting how the world has kind of conspired around this. I have quite a few friends in Toronto. I have quite a few friends in the GTA. But I always feel guilty asking people, because a lot of those people I don't know very well yet. And so I felt guilty about asking if I could stay over at people's homes, or if anybody had a couch to stay on. And now, or at least I hope, that's not going to be an issue, because I have a godfather in the tradition that I'm just starting to become part of, who is very welcoming and open of me staying with them. And I also have now a boyfriend down in Hamilton, which is only an hour away, where I can go and stay with him and spend time with him whenever I do go to school. So it's a beautiful chance to go and do that. So all my worries and concerns about having to ask for a place to stay has now changed, because I have more stable places to stay, and I really appreciate that those people would make a space for me and host me. And it's very strange how fast the world just changes. 2 months ago I would never have thought that I would join this tradition. I would never thought that I would have a boyfriend, and so school was going to be quite a lonely experience for me. And now it's something that I can share, not only with you guys, because, and if you're still watching this video after 43 minutes, you're a very good fan, may I just say. But to be able to experience it with somebody that is becoming quite intimate with me, somebody who isn't my family, I'm quite thrilled about. I don't look thrilled, but I really am. It's just touching me deeply. So that's the caliber of what's been happening to me and what's been happening with me. I love the course because it is a master's level course. So when we're sat in there, we are it is the caliber of a master's level. The instructors so far really gear it towards the profession, and so already I'm starting to feel less intimidated about actually going and becoming a psychotherapist in the future. And these are people who have been practicing for many years themselves, and so there's a great wisdom in that. Well, obviously there's a great wisdom in that because they've been asked to, instruct in the course. But there's a lot of experience to that. There's a lot of very concrete examples that are brought up, and it's I've already changed in 2 months. I'm very different. Well, not a very different person. I am a different person than 2 months ago. So we will see what happens. The first couple of weeks were interesting. At least the first 2 weekends were interesting because we had 3 different instructors. One was the founder, and each of them brought a very different bent to the profession than their comrades, their colleagues, I should say. And so I find that. Hey, Lily, you alright? My dog just walked past me here and she's looking at, I don't know, what are you looking at, Liz? Do you want to say hello to the people? Come here, Liz. Come here. See, who's this here? Who's that? It's people of YouTube. This is my dog, Lily. You've probably seen her on Facebook, for those people of you who know me on Facebook. And she's a beautiful girl, aren't you, Liz? You're a beautiful, beautiful girl. And she's down here. She's been with me while I've been doing this video. She's a great bloke, aren't you, Lils? You're just a wonderful human being, aren't you? Well, a beautiful soul. But I absolutely love her so much. And every single morning when I come downstairs from the apartment, she races up to me as if she's never seen me before. And every time I come back from class, there she is waiting for me very patiently, aren't you? Yeah, you are. And you're just there waiting for me. And you're so excited. And you're a beautiful joy to come back to. And you're very beautiful. She wants something. I'm not going to give it to her, but she wants something, don't you, Liz? Okay, go on, go down, go on, go. Say bye-bye. Say bye-bye, bye-bye. Bye-bye. About 70% of being a psychotherapist is having conversations with dogs, just so you know. That's what I love, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking forward to the future. Oh, bye-bye, Lily. I'm looking forward to seeing what will come out of this program. And already my whole vision of the future has changed. And I can feel it. I can see it, I can almost touch it. But I'm going to be a very different person in 2 years, I think. If after one weekend I can go into such a vulnerable place and then feel comfortable talking about it and putting it out on YouTube like this, I feel like there's going to be a lot of things that will shift in my life. And even now, like today, we've talked about families, we've talked about, or at least I've talked about my family at times on these videos, and something that I was always feeling with my family was great frustration, because I felt, and I have felt, that they've treated me as a child for many, many years. I'm 31 years old, I'm a middle child, but I was always, but what I realized was when I was around them, I act like a child, they treat me like a child, so I act like a child. And I get very defensive around my mum and dad especially. And there are reasons for that. It's not appropriate for me to go into because it's more of a private thing. But I also act like a complete brat many, many times. So, like, something that would always trigger me was when my mum would say things like, I'm 31 years old, she will still say to me, drive safely, you watch yourself on those roads, or like I'll be taking the dog out and she'll say, well, you should go and put a coat on, it's cold outside. And how I would take that before was very much as I'm stupid, She thinks I'm stupid. She needs to tell me to put a coat on because I'm stupid. I'm a child. I'm not gonna know. And today, I very surprisingly didn't react that way. And it was such a lovely moment. I remember I was saying to her, I'm going to take Lily out. And she said, oh, well, put a coat on. It's cold outside. How I would have normally reacted before was, don't tell me what to do. You know, the whole, like, inner defensive child comes out, right? Like, how dare you? I'm 31 years old. Like, you know, shut up, you know. And instead, I felt what the meaning was. And I go over and I kissed her on the head and I said, I love you. And then I said, you know, I've realized all these years, when you say things like that, you don't actually mean them to be controlling. You're actually just saying that you love me. And she looks up at me and she smiles and she says, it's taken you 31 years to realize that. And it was just a beautiful moment. I am looking at a lot of my anger issues come from my upbringing. A lot of my anger issues come from when I was a child and when I was a teenager. And a lot of my anger issues has come from not being able to be sovereign in my life. I'm not an angry person, just so you know. I didn't need to just say that then, but I like anger is that, like, face, that door that is hiding my abandonment issues. But something that I have really wanted to shift and work on is my relationship with my parents, because we both, or all three of us, wound each other very, very much, many times. Some of it's inappropriate, some of it's sometimes unfortunately appropriate. But like any family, there's, you know, it's not going to be perfect. And what I've really been trying to focus on, and well, earlier in the year I came to see this, was that my mum and dad will never be able to show me the love that I want from them. But that doesn't mean that they're not showing love in their own way. And I have to start to understand where that love is coming from and how that love is being expressed. So a good example of that is, my dad does not understand my spirituality. My dad doesn't understand or get my interest in spirituality or my spiritual life. He's uncomfortable with it. But with Mythwood, for example, he understands building. And so his way of saying he supports me in that is to make compliments about what's being built over there. And so at Christmas time, his gift to me was an axe. And at the time, I was slightly disappointed, because what am I going to do with an axe? Until I realized, in almost like a flash of insight, what I realized was that was his way of saying, this is something I think you need over there, and I want to contribute to that. And then, later on in the year, he built me a deck. You know, he built me a deck at my site at Mythwood, and it was a beautiful deck, and it is a beautiful deck, and he spent a lot of time building it and organizing it. And it's because, I mean, sure, his perfectionist came out in it, but it was because he wanted to contribute to that aspect of my life. And at the time, I mean, I became frustrated with the process, and I feel really guilty about that. But that sense of guilt is because I understand that I did not understand what he was saying with it. Before, I would have looked at that as him trying to insert himself into an aspect of my life and to control it. What I came to realize was that it was his way of saying that he supports what I'm doing over there, even though he doesn't understand it. And so, and I do appreciate what he's done. I appreciate that he spent so much time building that. And when I saw that, and I came to understand the message behind it and what he was trying to say. Because my dad is one of those people where, and I think it's because of all the pain he's had when he was young, he doesn't show and he doesn't say what he actually means. To him, it's very uncomfortable. He has a lot of shadow work. He has a lot of shadow around him, right? In psychotherapy and in therapies, we talk about the shadow aspect as being all of those parts where we bury aspects of our true self into the shadow because we are socialized and told that we're not allowed them. So basically, that feeling of shame and guilt and all of those feelings come up when we talk about the shadow, because those are the shadows, those obscure aspects of our true selves, which we're afraid to claim. And my dad has a lot of that, just like a lot of people do. But so going back to the whole issue of anger, one of the issues is, in my life, I've expressed a lot of anger towards my parents because, and sometimes it was justified. I have to preface that. Sometimes it was justified, just like their anger towards me at certain times was justified and is justified. But I'm talking about more the unjustified anger that came out because I thought I knew what they were saying, but what they were actually saying was very different, or that they said something and it triggered a defense because it touched one of my insecurities. And so over the next 2 years, I think that is one of my goals, is to really work on that relationship with them both, and to not allow unjustified anger to come out against them. And going back to what I was talking about with the situation that that I had brought up and thought about and experienced in that exercise, it underlines for me that anger by itself can be powerful if it fuels constructive change. So generally in my life, I do try to be very constructive, but it's a change. It really is contextual. Sometimes I'm feeling bitter and angry and I suppress it because there's no possible way of changing it, and so there's no way for me to really dwell on it, but I don't bury it so deep that I can't access it and it just wells up again and again inappropriately. I don't feel that way. But stepping into that anger in that exercise was insightful because it taught me quite a bit of what lies beneath that anger. And I think that's really the main understanding that comes out of all of this, is that any emotion, especially the negative ones, or what we call negative emotions, really are more cloaks that hide deeper issues. And if we can get to those deeper issues, we can begin to understand, and then through almost like an alchemical process, through alchemy, we shift that energy into something else. So, as I said before, over the next 2 years, it's going to be a very powerful experience, I think, and I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to my friend Kerry, who told me about the ability to do a PLAR to even get into this program. I am grateful for my parents, who are my employers, by the way. I work for them. I'm grateful for my parents to be accommodating for me to go away on weekends to do this. I am grateful for those people in my life who are watching this YouTube video, for example. I am grateful for the people in my life who support me in being able to explain and explore and go through. I am also very grateful for the people in my life who are supporting me in ways like offering me a bed, being there for emotional support. So it's going to be quite the adventure, and over the next 2 years you're going to see a lot of videos from me on these experiences. I'm looking forward to it. So if you're still with me after an hour of me blabbing away, that's cheers to you, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching, and have a splendid rest of your week. Goodbye.